What is going on, y'all? How's it going? So, we just got a new trailer and a pretty sizable gameplay showcase for Atlus's newest game, Metaphor Refantazio, and it looks really interesting. I thought it would be cool to just kind of quickly go over my thoughts, as well as do some quick analysis of the trailer and the showcase. So yeah, let's just get right into it. So the first main thing I wanted to go over from the gameplay demonstration with Hashino was the field exploration. Now they do specify later that there is a mix between their traditional dungeons along with these open fields to explore. From the looks of it, it also seems like there will be a better balance between these two, and by that I mean it looks like there will be an equal amount of dungeons to open areas. I'm really happy about this because one of the things I kind of disliked about a game like Shin Megami Tensei V was that there wasn't enough traditional dungeons in that game. Now, don't get me wrong, I loved the open exploration that was in that game, but I'd say I'm really much more of a fan of the traditional dungeon crawling for these kinds of games. Next, they show off how in this game there is a mix between the traditional turn-based battles along with real-time action combat. We don't know fully how these two systems of combat will mesh with each other, but I think based on how later in the showcase they demonstrate how attacking enemies of a lower level than you in real time allows you to defeat them in real time as well, which will definitely help cut down on needless battles and ultimately save time for the player. I think this is a really good middle ground between forcing you into fights with really weak enemies, which everyone can agree is annoying, and something like Ryoji's insta-kill ability in Persona 5, which was a little bit too OP. After that, they show off another large open area, and Hashino shows off the player running through and points out a horde of enemies. It really makes me wonder how battles against large groups of enemies like that will work. Will horde battles only be fought in real-time combat? Will you be able to fight them in the turn-based combat and do something similar to how horde fights worked in SMT V and Apocalypse? I guess we'll find out more when the game comes out. During that whole first part that they showed us, there was a little fairy character that followed the MC around and even plays a music spell. They explained that all the music in the game is actually only occurring in the protagonist's head, which is definitely an unnecessary but cool detail. This game definitely shows that a shit ton of effort went into the world building. Also, during this small part where the protagonist is running around in the open area, the fairy character will constantly blurt out things to say to you. It makes me think that she'll probably be our navigation character, similar to how they work in the Persona games. Then Hashino takes us to the main city capital in this game, showing us some of the areas we can walk around in. It looks like a town or a city you'd see in any other kind of RPG, but I will point out that the artwork and world building here are phenomenal. We see a bounty board and a weapon shop, typical fantasy RPG stuff, you all know. But in this part, they say that your party will be more customizable, but in this weapons menu they show during that, just lets us see that each party member can only use one type of weapon, which is a really discouraging limitation when they talk about how customizable these guys are supposed to be. I really wish they would do something like what the protagonist in the original Persona 3 games had, where he could use multiple weapon types. Hopefully they mean that your party is more customizable in other ways. Once we get into the Gauntlet Runner section, it brings up some of the biggest questions and new information that I've been thinking about. He says this game revolves around the concepts of date and time. Something I've neglected to mention up until now is the calendar looking system on the right side of the screen, showing that this game probably has a time and calendar system similar to the Persona series. Although these made up day names will probably take some time to get used to. Not only that, but during the quest screen, it shows some of the rewards for quest completion, and some of them say that courage will be increased. This leads me to believe that this game also has a social stats system like Persona as well. This will probably impact things like the social interaction system that they show later, as well as some other kind of fame gaining system, as they've said earlier that to become the king you have to gain the people's favor. The next thing they show off is something I'm a little bit mixed on. They show that traveling to other places takes up not just in-game time but real time as well. I was initially confused about how this would work, but it looks like on the map screen before you select where you want to go, it will tell you how many days it will take to reach. On one hand, this is nice as it will give you time to talk to the other characters and engage with some of the other smaller systems in this game, but also the fact that it takes up real time seems pretty silly to me. Maybe doing activities in the Gauntlet Runner will make the process take up less real time, but right now we still don't know. I will admit though, seeing the world flying past you while you're in the Gauntlet Runner is really cool and just adds more to my point of how the world building in this game is going to be unreal. The UI looks fantastic in this game as usual. These people just keep outdoing themselves. One of the big things they show off is that this game will have a job system similar to the Final Fantasy series. I will admit that I'm not the most knowledgeable person when it comes to Final Fantasy, but from what I can tell, your characters have jobs that can be switched whenever you want, depending on what you need them to do, like if you need them to be a mage or a warrior. It looks like a similar system is in place here, but likely with an Atlas twist. This is directly connected to the new system that they have in this game called Archetypes, which look very similar to Personas, as the character that has them equipped will inherit their elemental affinities and be able to use that archetype's skills. The job system and the archetypes seem directly connected, as when they show this off, we can see the jobs each party member has equipped, and then when they show off the archetypes, it looks like each archetype is connected to a certain job. I can tell this connection because once they equip the Seeker archetype onto the main character, their job changes to Seeker. Then we see another cool detail, as while navigating the menus we see what looks like maybe a skill tree or unlock tree for new archetypes. This is likely a way for the archetypes to not only learn new skills, but give players the choice as to what skills they want to invest in or what archetypes they want to earn. Overall, it reminds me a lot of the mantra grid from Digital Devil Saga 2. But do take my words with a grain of salt, because we aren't told explicitly what this menu is for. I'm just assuming. After that, we see a demonstration of some of the turn-based combat. The commands we see here are Archetype, Melee, Item, Pass, Guard, and Synthesis. This is very similar to the modern Persona menu, just with Persona being replaced with Archetype, and a new Pass command that isn't in the Persona games. I'll get more into why I think there is even a Pass command here later. The synthesis option here is described as Team Up, so it probably has a similar function to Theurgy in Persona 3 Reload. In the Archetype skill menu, we start to see something which I personally thought was very interesting. Some of the skill names are different from the normal SMT and Persona naming system, while some are the same. Some examples we see here are Psyche and Cyclo, which I'm assuming are the same as Zan and Mazan or Garu and Magaru. We have Day, which is the same as Dia, as well as Taru Kaja, which is the same as the SMT naming conventions. I won't go over all the ones that we see, I just find it the smallest bit exciting to see that this game isn't completely detached from its roots, you know? Once we're in the dungeon, we see that we have a scan ability like in Persona 5 or Soul Hackers 2. The coloring convention of the strength of the enemies is basically the same as those games too. Like I talked about earlier, the important thing here is that we see the weaker enemies can be attacked in the real-time system and still give decent rewards. I really like this middle ground that they found. Unfortunately, during this part we also see one of the things I'm really worried about for this game, and it's something that I've seen Atlas trending more towards in their recent games. You can hear behind Hashino's commentary that the characters seem to never shut the fuck up. This was one of the things about Soul Hackers 2 and to a lesser extent Persona 3 Reload that I absolutely despised. I understand that they might be trying to fill dead air with talking or dialogue from someone to keep things interesting, but sometimes I just want to soak in the atmosphere or the music without constant talking from the characters. Not to mention that this approach seems to forget that they can't possibly record enough dialogue for it to not start getting really repetitive after a while. You start to notice this fast in a game like Soul Hackers 2, where somebody always has to say something every single time you select an option in the menus during battle. I don't know if I'm in the minority with this, because I haven't seen many other people talking about it, but it's something with modern Atlas games that just really bugs me. Then we see some more of the turn-based battle gameplay, where it looks like you get a very heavy advantage in battle if you ambush the enemy, because we see the enemy has half of its HP bar just chunked right off the bat, as well as having a status ailment put on it. We also see that it looks like Mudo is another skill naming convention that's returning. Another important thing we see here is that when the protagonist uses this skill, it hits the weakness of the enemy. We see two things after this. The icons at the top of the screen flash, and it transitions from the protagonist's turn to the next character in the turn order. All this seems to point to the fact that this game has some kind of press turn system, if not just straight up press turn. If it was a one more system, the turn would have stayed on the protagonist. This leads me to believe that these icons up here are press turn icons. This leads back to what I was saying about the presence of the pass command in the menu. This system must have more in common with press turn than one more, because why else would they have a pass command in the options? The only question still remaining is why two icons start flashing and not just one. This is kind of why I said that this might be a press turn adjacent system instead of just press turn. Overall, this gets me really excited because I vastly prefer press turn over the one more system. Next we see the dungeons, which I'm really looking forward to, as with the art and style this game has, it will probably lead to really cool and atmospheric places to explore. However, they also say that they've tried to cut down on things that will bore us, but I really hope that doesn't mean that they cut out the challenging parts that make Atlus's dungeons so iconic, like their puzzles and labyrinthian design. For the bonding with followers section, we see how interacting with the characters in this game will benefit you, showing the persona influence that this game clearly has. Small note, but we briefly see the protagonist conversing back to these characters, which shows that he is not a silent protagonist, which thank God. One of the things I really liked about Soul Hackers 2 was how the main character was not silent and actually had a personality. I'm glad to see Atlus embracing this new direction for their main characters, since it really just helps the story overall when we don't have a mute self-insert as the most important character. We also see here that bonding with these characters gives you new archetypes, which I really like, as it is a much more tangible benefit to you directly as opposed to the social links' main benefits being towards persona fusion. The last really interesting thing we see is how every party member's archetype is fully customizable, meaning that your whole party basically has the power of the wild card from Persona. I think this is ultimately a great thing for the game, as it really synergizes with and promotes the follower system so you can have access to as many archetypes as possible. We still don't know exactly how the skills for the archetypes are obtained, but they'll likely be just as customizable. All in all, this game looks phenomenal, and I can't wait to learn more about this game in the lead up to its release, and I know it'll be a great time once we finally get it in our hands. Thank you all for watching, hope you learned something new, and I will see you all later.